am I my brother's keeper? Which Smerdyakov asserts, and I believe Ivan asserts it in the chapter, either in the Brothers Get Acquainted or the Rebellion chapter. And in the chapter where Ivan and Smerdyakov are talking, the one which I believe is called a rather obscure one, I get this indication that Ivan knows that he is acting in such a way that is in compliance with this plan that Smerdyakov is articulating. Now, even though he's not like doing anything in one sense, he's not overtly making decisions to bring about the murder of his father, he kind of feels implicated. Right? Does that sort of make sense? And I think this is what's tormenting Ivan, and this is what makes Ivan want to go to Moscow instead of Chermashnya. Because if he goes to Chermashnya, it's kind of like he's complying. He's going along with the plan because that's what he's supposed to be doing if this is all going to go well. And now, granted, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter whether he goes to Moscow or not, but it's a way of him trying to justify him to himself and to relinquish any responsibility, to let go of any responsibility that he might have in what follows. Which reveals that Ivan doesn't actually believe what he says about, without God all things are permitted or permissible. And so I think Ivan is someone who is tormented by his conscience. And we're going to see that conscience is a tormentor. That's why you have a conscience, is so that you can be tormented. Yeah? No. Is that true?
I think so.
You think so? Okay. Okay. Sister thinks conscience is for the sake of being tormented. Yeah. Any thoughts on this? Is this true? Is this so? Conscience is so that you can suffer. You have a conscience so that you can suffer.
What's the lead you to like the ending good?
Yeah.
Suffer now to keep you on track.
Yeah.
Now the good.
Yeah. So it's a really Dostoevsky was really mystified by conscience, I think. In a lot of his books, conscience plays a central role, and it's life would be so much easier if you didn't know or feel that you were doing wrong when you did wrong, right? So it's this really strange thing that it's a way of tormenting yourself, and a lot of times we despise ourselves, we hate ourselves, we criticize ourselves when we've done wrong, and it's sort of like it's best to let sleeping dogs lie. Sometimes people feel like just don't. We made a mistake, but it would be less painful to have to know that we made a mistake. And the thing about conscience is it's like the good shining through the evil or the sin, or however you wanted to put it. And so it's the way that the good is made manifest in the wrongdoing. So it's conscience is a revelation, I think, most fundamentally for Dostoevsky. It's a revelation of the good when you've departed from it. You can never leave the good, I think is what he's saying, because when you do try to leave the good, you're tormented by your conscience, and that can only happen if by leaving the good you actually haven't left the good. You've tried to, you've rebelled, so to speak, but you can't fully depart from it. You can return the ticket, as Ivan says, but it doesn't depart from you, and so you're going to be tormented and torment yourself by having departed from it, even though it hasn't left you. It's like that passage in the Psalm somewhere. If you go down to Sheol, if you go down to hell, God is there. Where can you go where God is not, and that sort of thing. So I think conscience is this thing, and Ivan is also enamored by the concept, or the reality, not really the concept, the reality of conscience. And I think all of these theories that he's having is a way of trying to make conscience not have a hold on him. Life would be so much easier if conscience didn't get a hold on you, but it does. And so if you could come up with ideas and theories for why it would let its hold go, it would be so much easier to live in the life of the flesh, as we were reading in the Romans at the beginning, right? But you that life is going to it's just always going to kind of
Where did
be burned.
Dostoevsky get like this? I don't know. Why does he write about the conscience so much? Was it like, does he like read St. Ignatius, or was it something in his time, or why is it such a big thing?
I mean, I don't know a lot about like his own. I mean, I've read bits and pieces of different biographies. I think personally, most of what he is, what motivates his work is his own experiences. I mean, he had a really crazy life, and I think a lot of it is just his own understanding of himself. So I think he depicts characters that are various aspects of himself. And so if you've ever read Crime and Punishment, conscience is I think the central theme of Crime and Punishment. It's conscience is sort of where you die, but you're also kind of reborn. We'll see that in the reading for either Wednesday or this Wednesday or Friday in the life of Zosima. We'll see an example of this. Yeah, I don't know exactly the details of like who he was reading, although you get a sense that he's quoting a lot of people. But I think the real bulk of it is from his own experience. Okay. The Grand Inquisitor, it's going to still be on this theme. I want to spend the bulk of the class talking about the Grand Inquisitor. So, the questions of meaning. So I'll call this, there are questions of meaning to life, like my particular individual life, meaning to life in general. What's the meaning of existence? Why is there something rather than nothing? Is there a God? Why does God do the things that he does? All of these questions are these really fundamental questions that are going to have an effect on the ways that we think about our lives and the purpose of our lives. And what I think he's trying to say is these questions haunt, torment, they tear you apart. You feel torn by these questions. Some days it just seems so obvious that God exists. Other days you're not quite sure. Some days it seems so obvious that the sacraments are essential to your life. Other days you're kind of like, what's the real meaning? I'm just doing this because that's what people say I need to be doing. At least this is me. I'll just speak for myself. And so even now I'm still haunted by these questions. Just because I answered these questions yesterday doesn't mean I don't need to answer them today, right? If nothing in my life ever changed, then answering them once would be sufficient. But I think the part about being a human is life is dynamic. Life isn't like a mathematical proof. Mathematical proofs are nice because they're static. You get all the evidence right there, right before you, and you just run, plug and chug, and you get your answer, and there it is. And there's no sense of uncertainty. There's no sense of well, there is a sense of uncertainty if you don't know how to do the math. But once you've mastered the method, there's no room for freedom in math. That's why it's so easy. Once you get it, all right, it's so easy. It's cut and dry. There's really no freedom. Freedom doesn't play a direct role in proof. And I think what Dostoevsky is trying to say through the Grand Inquisitor is that's what we want deep down. Maybe not. We're tempted by them. I don't want to say that's what we want. We're tempted by wanting to answer the questions of meaning, those deep, fundamental questions about God and immortality and love. What should I give my life to? Or is it worth even having a life in the first place? Those questions would be so much easier answered if we could answer them in the way that didn't require freedom. If they could be answered for us. The nice thing about math is you're not really answering the questions. The questions are being answered for you. You're just kind of looking at what other people have already done in that sense, or what's already kind of there. And so you don't have to really make a once you see why 2 + 2 = 4, there's almost not a decision that needs to be made in do you accept this, right? Are you a believer in 2 + 2 = 4? Like, that's not really a question that people ask. It's because in one sense, once you see it, it's so obvious that it's not a decision that needs to be made. It doesn't engage freedom. And I think what Dostoevsky is trying to say is that's completely different from the question about God and really like morality and happiness and immortality and all that sort of stuff. This and this are not the same types of questions. And this is always going to require, the question of God is always going to require a sense of, how do I put it, darkness. Doesn't mean that there can't be complete conviction. It means that there's going to always be a type of mystery. You're always going to have to engage the free will. You're going to have to make a decision. Collecting all the evidence doesn't 100% decide whether you accept this or not. Collecting all the evidence for this sort of settles the question on whether you believe 2 + 2 = 4. And so I think what he's saying is freedom was given to us, purchased at this really great price, as the Grand Inquisitor says. Jesus came to purchase freedom for us. You gave all of yourself so that we could freely respond to your act of love, but you didn't quite realize that it wasn't so much a gift you gave us, but it was a burden. Now we have to make the decision for ourselves what we're going to worship. And humans are so tormented by the question of what we're going to worship. It would be better if it could just be determined for us what to worship than we have to it would be better if it were like settled on our behalf by some theory than if we had to make that free decision ourselves. Here's what he has in mind. The Grand Inquisitor has in mind. He uses the 3 temptations in the desert, and I think these ultimately have to do with ways of temptations that were saying, look, Christ, if you did these things, humans would worship you. You would actually be able to give them real happiness. Real happiness doesn't, according to the Grand Inquisitor, It doesn't come through freedom. Suffering, uncertainty, anxiety, that comes through freedom. Real happiness comes through not having to worry, not having to doubt, not having to question. That's where happiness comes. And if you would have, and then the three things, if you would have performed the miracle, if you would have turned the stones into bread, if you would have performed a miracle such that it took away all the doubts of the believers, not the believers, it took away all the doubts of the people that are questioning, who should I worship? And you performed this miracle, then all the people would say, I don't need to worry about who to give my life to anymore, because it's as if it were like settled for me. The question of who should I freely give my life to is more like the miracle takes my life from me. I don't have to freely give it away. The miracle takes it from me, in a sense, because it's like you don't have to decide what should you give your intellect to, in a way. The truth of the matter, this sort of takes it. It like necessitates your belief in 2 + 2 = 4. And I think what he's saying is the miracle would have done the same thing. It would have been like the geometrical Euclidean, as Ivan likes to kind of think, proof. There would have been no doubt or anxiety or uncertainty. Freedom would have been sort of circumvented. In the face of this miracle, it would have been like, you don't need to be free anymore. You don't need to worry or question. All right, and so I think the burden of freedom is what the Grand Inquisitor is trying to alleviate. He's trying to unburden us, take away the burden of having to answer these questions for ourselves. Here's an example, a real world example. Should I believe blank? And you could fill it in. Should I believe that, and then you could say that the Holy Spirit could have become a man. Should I believe that God is all good? Should I believe that this person is an example of a good life or whatever? And those are hard questions to answer. A lot of times what happens is people say, well, since I'm a blank, and you could fill in the blank. I'm a Catholic, I'm a Christian, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I'm a Russian, although he probably wouldn't like this and throw it in there. But the idea is you have this what we'll call ideology. It settles those questions for you. So if you're uncertain about what to believe, and if you find yourself this, you don't have to worry about the question. The question's already been answered. The question's been answered here. You don't have to answer the questions. You get an easy answer. You don't have to be tormented by the question. You don't have to be tormented by, did Jesus rise from the dead? Because since you're a Catholic, Catholics believe Jesus rose from the dead. You know how to answer that question, right? Yeah, yes, he did. And I think that's what the Grand Inquisitor is saying. Like the Grand Inquisitor is saying, look, we are giving people a story on what to believe, so they don't have to be tormented by what to believe. Because if they really thought, no, I need to figure out with my own free will, not like an individualistic type of, this has nothing to do with like individualism. This just means the question of, do you believe in God? Do you believe in immortality? If you really had to answer that question for yourself, the Grand Inquisitor thinks, most people would be so tormented by uncertainties about that that they probably would just spend their whole life kind of being in this state of suffering, or trying to avoid the question, trying to find ways of like coping and medicating their doubts and about whether there is a meaning to life. And so what the Grand Inquisitor thinks happens is we get a story that says, here's your nice package of things to accept, things to believe about this, and so you don't have to suffer the question. So the Grand Inquisitor is proposing a view of Christianity, which is an ideological Christianity, which says the goal of Christian belief, but it's not just Christian, because I think really what Dostoevsky is saying is this can apply to all ideology, socialism, communism, any sort of political theory where that says, here are all of life's questions answered right here for you. As long as you subscribe to this, here's what you're going to believe. All of those are done for the sake of not requiring you to have to think about this for yourself. It's a way of, I think, trying to give you peace. At least the Grand Inquisitor thinks this. It's motivated by the desire that humans will always be tormented by the question of God. If you really, really, really think and pursue the question of God, the closer you get to an understanding of God, the more you'll realize how far you are from an understanding of God. The more you actually try to love, the more you'll realize how much of a failure you are at loving. It's a tormenting thing. If you could just have an easy story that requires you not to have to look at it too closely, but you could look at it just through this ideology, life would be so much more tranquil. Does that make sense? Any questions or comments about this? There's a lot going on here. Yeah.
So is he saying that, like, for example, Catholics just like made up a story to answer the question, or does he think the story could actually be real?
What the Grand Inquisitor is saying is, for the vast majority of Catholics, they don't at the end of the day, they don't really care whether it's true or not. So it's like if I mean, think about this. I mean, this is I've been in this boat before. The three persons and one nature, and you get into all this sort of like crazy stuff that all these like old Greek church fathers talked about, and the Trinity and all this sort of stuff, and I'm like, I know. In one sense, none of this in my level of comprehension at a certain point, I'm like, I don't really even see the point of this. It doesn't really matter, and so I kind of just, tote the line. I just say what is supposed to be said, and I don't really understand what it means. I think what Dostoevsky is trying to say through the Grand Inquisitor is, for a good majority of people, the question of truth isn't the primary question. The question is, what does the story do to you? If it gives you a sense of belonging, a sense of tranquility, a sense of peace and certainty, so you can sleep at night thinking like, I'll die and I'll have another life after this life, and you don't actually have to really think hard or get into those questions in a real internal way. That's what people want. Is it a true story or not? I think it's maybe not even a question that crosses a lot of people's minds. And so, I don't know, does that kind of, it's like, what do I need to say, regardless of whether it's true or not? Because it's almost taken for granted. Whatever I need to say, I'll just take it as true. That's ultimately what like ideology is. If someone says, what do you think about this? And instead of thinking about what you think about this, you think about, well, what should I be saying about this? And then you're looking for what other people say, which is what the but the ism. What does the ism think about it? And so you try to like just let the ism do all the hard. It bears the burden for you. Last thing, and then we can see if we have any questions about this, because this Dostoevsky wrote this chapter, the Grand Inquisitor, and he was so tormented by like the strength of this and like the weight of this that he wasn't sure if the rest of the book actually like sufficiently addresses the question. I mean, he was really, really tormented by some of this stuff. So he thought he gave like the best apology for atheism, even though he wasn't an atheist, right? And that like really tormented him. Oftentimes we look for people to help us make decisions. Oh, what should I do with my occupation or my vocation or whatever? And it's as if I'm going around looking for someone that says, "Oh, Jager, here's what you should be doing. You should do this, this, this. Oh, it's pretty clear that you're this type of person, so it would be a great idea to marry that person, or it would be a horrible idea to marry that person, or it would be a really great thing to study this and not study that." Because if you find someone like that, then you can take your responsibility and any sort of blame that you might get for making wrong decisions and place it on that person, so that when things go south, you could say, they're to be blamed for why things aren't going well. Does that kind of make sense? Like in a sense, I didn't really make the decision. It was the ideology. I didn't really make the decision. It was my mentor. It was this person, right? And that's where that peace, although it's a false peace, that peace comes from, is you can be relieved of responsibility. And I think the Grand Inquisitor realizes what we're doing is we're taking all the responsibility from all of these people, and we're taking it on ourselves, and we're bearing all their responsibility. So we're suffering for their sake. Does that kind of make sense? Questions, comments about this? This is if you are a Christian Catholic believer in some very broad sense of believer, this should trouble you. This should trouble you. What to make of it is doesn't mean the Grand Inquisitor isn't making good observations. The reason it troubles me is because I recognize that he's talking a lot about me when he's making these condemnations. They're not really condemnations, it's just this evaluation of what people are really looking for. Right? Yeah.
I have a question about miracles. So you said that, or it was saying that you don't give your life freely, like the miracle takes it from you, in like specifically the three temptations. So, like, why did other miracles happen?
Yeah. Well, so think about it right now. There's this question of did those miracles occur? Did Jesus rise from the dead? Did he turn the water into wine? And did he make the blind see? All that. And you might say, well, as a Catholic, I think, of course they occurred, right? Like, what's the real basis for believing in those? This goes back to the question in Book 1 on the elders. For the realist, the miracle springs from faith, not faith from the miraculous, because he says, for certain people, anything that they see, even a man floating off the ground with light floating around him, they wouldn't interpret it as either. They wouldn't interpret it as a miracle. They wouldn't accept it as a miracle. They'd maybe accept it as a hallucination. Maybe they've had, like, I think I mentioned Scrooge, the old bread and moldy cheese, is what he thinks is the ghost is. The ghost is nothing but moldy cheese, right? Or they would say, oh, it's not a miracle, it's just there turns out to be this crazy law of nature that we never really fully understood, and there's nothing special about a man rising, because it turns out, anyway, and so that I think is what matters is the attitude people's attitude. If people don't want to see miracles, they won't see miracles. Even if they see people floating off the ground, or hear stories about people floating off the ground or whatever. I think the way that the Grand Inquisitor is talking about miracle here is something which would settle the question: is Jesus God? And if he could turn the bread into wine, no. If he could do that, that would be cool too. but if you could turn the water into wine or the stones into bread, like that would be the condition under which, like, I become fully convinced. There's no more doubts. And I think part of what Dostoevsky's trying to say is, in true faith, there is never like mathematical proof. Not because we don't have it, but because in matters of faith there can't be, because it requires this type of suffering, this type of free act of like love, which is this free act of nothing other than my giving myself away is determining why I'm doing this. No other extrinsic things are necessitating that action. So I think the way he's using miracle here is extrinsic necessitators, maybe that would settle the question on our behalf. So I think that's kind of ultimately what he means by miracle, and the rejection of the turning of the stones into bread. Even though, according to like the gospel stories, right, Jesus did other miracles, but I think what he's trying to say is this is indicative that the miracles which Christ does, they don't necessitate in that way. You can still turn it down all you want. You're free to give a different interpretation and read all the texts about, the Bible and all that, and you can say, no, I don't buy it. I don't think he rose from the dead. And I think often what people are looking for is evidence that would necessitate he had to have risen from the dead. There's no way he couldn't but have risen from the dead. And that's going to be the certainty of faith. But I think what that would then do is it reduces faith. It becomes a type of reason. It becomes a type of like, the way Dostoevsky is admitting this requires a type of freedom, or I'll just put this in terms of like logic. That's the way Ivan or the Grand Inquisitor puts it. Whereas this doesn't have that structure. That it doesn't have that form, and so there's always a sort of darkness and uncertainty. To have perfect conviction in God is also going to be at the same time like the experience of a doubt, a distance. It's like the perfect experience of the love of someone is also this recognition of their mystery. It doesn't say like, okay, now I finally understand what this person is and what they're going to do and why they're going to do what they do. Right? It's not a doubt that's a rejection, but it's a doubt that says, I'm committed, but I'm not entirely sure what I'm committed to. And I think that requires a type of freedom, which is scary because you don't know what you're fully committed to. And this is a line that's going to come up for the reading, I think, for Friday. It's a dreadful thing to fall into the hands of God because you don't know what's going to come of your life. And it's like Job. It seems like so good to believe in God, but unless you're Job, right? Like, and so there's something really really radical about this. And I think the Grand Inquisitor is saying the vast majority of people just won't be able to tolerate that type of life, that type of conviction, commitment, that type of yeah, I don't know, their conscience, they'll be too tormented that they won't be able to, and so they'll rather look for something that will take all that away from them. So I don't know, does that kind of make sense? We only have like 2 minutes. Okay, any other quick questions? Any just final thoughts, and we can bring it up next?
I was going to say, it seems ironic because like the miracle like will take my freedom from me because I like comfortably, but like in my life I recognize that like yesterday my best friend could have done something to like prove that he loves me.
Yeah.
And then like today I can just like not believe that.
Yeah.
Question that all over again. It's like,
Yeah.
I feel like there could be, and there have been like almost miraculous things that have happened in my life, and then like the next day.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you say like, at the time it really seemed like it meant a lot, and now it just doesn't. Maybe I was a little too sentimental or emotional, and maybe that didn't mean as much as I thought it did. And so yeah. So I think that would be a sort of miracle that is a free miracle, because it requires you every day to that sounds so stupid, to reevaluate whether it was a miracle or not, because this is the thing about the human life, is it's always dynamic, and so at every moment you need to constantly be re-asking yourself, is this really what I believe? And unfortunately, the thing about Christianity is a lot of times people don't think that just because they said the creed once, they don't think they need to say it again, right? And it could turn out that you say it today, but maybe tomorrow, right? And this is why you need to pray each day for your daily bread. Okay, so there's still probably 3 hours worth of content we could talk about in the Grand Inquisitor, but we're going to move into the life of Zosima, which is an indirect response to this. Some of the most profound pages that I've read outside of Scripture, so I highly recommend really spending time reading this next book, because it has made me cry on more than one occasion.